mumble. Okay, so I'm happy to be back. I'm the kind of speaker that is much more interested in hearing what you think and what you have to say than I am at talking at you. Now, I've got lots of things to talk at you if you want me to just give you a lot of information. I brought a lot of information. But please, stop me anywhere along the way and ask questions. I'd much rather you ask a question if you had a thought than didn't ask the question, okay? So, and if we run over, I can come back, I can do as part 2, don't worry about it. It's more important that everybody feel like they know what's going on. And it's not that complicated. And somebody, you're still having trouble hearing me? Just come up this way and yell at you. Okay, well hi, I'm Gerda Maissel. My mom is back there in red, is Maissel. You heard I'm a physician and I have a business called My MD Advisor. I used to be the chief medical officer over at HealthQuest, which is now Nuvance. And long story short, I ended up changing careers, left the corporate world, and now I do this small business where I navigate people with complicated medical problems through the health system. So that's me. All right, so now I have to go here to change the slide. All right, so what are we talking about? What is solo aging? Well, in its very basis, you could think of people who live alone, right? Okay, could be solo aging. It's people without a spouse or partner, people without living children. Sometimes, and I put a picture of 2 people up there, even when you're with another person, you have a spouse, you could still be considered a solo ager, especially if that spouse is not able to contribute the way the spouse could contribute in the past. The burden may be all on you to manage things going forward. You know, you might have children and still be a solo ager. So why? Why would you be a solo ager if you still have children, if you have children? They don't live with you? Why else? They live far away? They don't communicate? Maybe they're disabled. Maybe they had their own surgery and are out of commission for a while. Maybe they just don't want to. Maybe you don't have a good relationship with them. Lots of people who have children are still dealing with all the things that people who are completely without family are dealing with. So in terms of classification and the stuff we're going to talk about in a few minutes, in terms of medical risk and things to do, even if you have children, you could still be considered a solo ager. Oh, you figured it out. Awesome.
Someone else did for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. And by the way, almost all of us become solo agers at some point, right? So while it's a designation, it applies to most of us. All right, so have you guys heard the term silver tsunami? Okay, so in the aging industry, silver tsunami is us. It is this big wave of baby boomers who are now 65 or older. I mean, there's different definitions, but there's this huge bump in the population right now that's going on, and so it's been nicknamed the silver tsunami. Another easy way to remember it is every day in America, 10,000 people are becoming 65 or older. There's this massive number of people that are becoming 65, that are becoming older. 10,000 a day turn 65. I don't have a pointer here, but right here. That's where we are between 2020 and 2030. There's a big jump. So you want to guess what percentage of older Americans, what percentage of the American population is over 65 now? 15? That's a good guess, 17%. But in 2040, which isn't that long away, it's going to go from 17 to 22%. So it's growing, the number of people. And it's not just the number of people, it's the percentage of the population. And the over 85 crowd, so people in this room, okay, 10 years from now, or maybe some of you are over 85, but as people continue to age, that over 85 demographic in 2040 is expected to be very significant. And so this matters. And the other piece that goes into this is the growth and the size of American single households. 40 years ago, you want to guess, 40 years ago, what percentage of American households were solo? Just one person. 40 years ago.
10%.
You're good. 13%. Today, what percentage of American households are single households?
25%.
Did you read my notes? 30%. You're like, if I had a prize, I'd give it to you. Perfect. So there is not only people getting older, the percentage of older people who are solos is growing. So what do you think the cause is? There's 4 causes that I could come up with for why we have this big growth in people growing older solo. So what could some reasons be?
Improvement in healthcare.
Improvement in healthcare, which causes
Longer life.
longer life. So people are living longer, so you have more solos. Why else?
Widows and widowers.
So people are living longer without their spouses, yeah.
High rate of divorce.
Divorce, right.
Got it again.
She's got all the answers. You don't even need me. She knows. So there's a new trend, and then, so you heard silver tsunami, it's called gray divorce, which is more people who are, I think they say 50, which to me that's not very good. 50 or older are getting divorced. It's bucking the American trend, which is actually in general there are less divorces. The divorce rate is down overall. But adults 50 and older are getting divorced at a higher rate. So more divorce, living longer, so you're losing your spouse. What else? 2 others. Somebody mentioned it before when we were talking about why, solo. Children don't live close. The pattern of how we live in America has changed. So people don't live as close to their children as they did, so in effect they become solo agers. And one more. Anybody think of the last one? Have you noticed this generation and previous generations are having less kids? So even the generation that is now 70, 80 had less kids than the generation before that. In my generation, I'm in my 60s, in my generation, you didn't see, it was unusual to see 4 and 5 kids. But in the generation above, you saw a lot of that. And now when I look at my kids' generation, like they're not having like 1 and 2 or none. People are having much less children. So all of this is leading to solo aging as becoming a topic. People in the elder care industry are talking about solo aging. Research is being done on solo aging because of the demographic, because it's such a growing demographic. Any questions at this point? Okay. Now we're on to stereotypes. So when you hear the term solo aging, or you're even thinking that maybe you're a solo ager, what are your thoughts about what that might mean? What's a stereotype of somebody who is a solo ager?
Somebody that should be living here, not in some house.
Good. Somebody who should be living here, I like that. But in general, what are some of the other stereotypes? If you think of somebody who's growing old alone, what do you think of?
Lonely.
That they're lonely. They have no money, they're poor. What else do you think about people who are getting older alone?
Depressed.
They're depressed. Right, so there is a lot of stigma, oddly, about solo aging. You may have even felt it yourself, like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? I'm on my own. How did this happen? there is this stereotype, and some of it is not, shall we say, helped by the medical profession. And, yes, I'm a physician, but I love this quote. Dr. Carney, in 2016, correctly identified this trend of this big bubble of people getting older alone. But what did she call them? Elder orphans. Ooh, don't like it. I will tell you other terms. Sometimes in the hospital, we would call them unaccompanied elders. In legal terms, sometimes they're called unrepresented elders. Unbefriended, kinless is another one that's come up. Wall Street Journal had an article within the last year on kinless seniors. So I think from elder orphans to solo seniors, we're better off with solo. Okay, so we talked about the stereotypes, and let me just give you a little bit of the reality check on what's real and what's not real. So one of the stereotypes is that solo agers are uneducated. Okay, that's actually correct. As a population, you are more likely in America to have a high school education and be alone than if you have a college education. It's just, across the population. Obviously, many solo agers are educated, but I thought that was an interesting statistic. Poor health is another one, and poor health literacy. Well, poor health literacy is a multifactorial issue. It does tend to go along with older people and lower income, but obviously does not speak to the solo aging population. The concern about them being poor and on Medicaid, I've heard that one a lot. Well, you know what the largest population is of people on Medicaid? Children. So, unfortunately, please, in the back.
Could you speak a little louder or use the microphone, please?
I am using the microphone, and I am speaking as loudly as I can. My throat's a little sore. Would you like to come down closer?
Yeah.
I'll let you come down closer.
It's still hard to hear.
You're still having a hard time hearing me?
Oh, yeah.
We're on 100%.
Seats up here.
I'll put it. And I could try holding it in my hand. It's better. Hanging from a necklace?
Holding it in your hand is really the best bet.
I can try it. I'm willing to do that. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well then, thank you for saying something. I thought it wasn't fixable. Okay. So, back to the stereotypes. Needy, sick, poor, unlovable, a burden to family. The stigma does not make any sense to me. It sort of reminds me of victim blaming, where people are in a certain circumstance and then we blame them because they're in that circumstance. Seems crazy to me. But just FYI, there are definitely stereotypes. Went the wrong way.
Along the bottom, the left side.
Yeah. Okay. Some other sort of paint the picture of the population. Women's realities who are solo agers. Women, what do we know about women? Women live longer. They just live longer than men. That's been established for a long time. But financially, and I'm not talking about this room, but financially, women are more likely to have had interrupted careers. So they may not have that Social Security income, they may not have the pension. They have to stretch their money longer than men have to. It's a reality. And you know that women were fundamentally paid less, right? We've got that whole pay gap, 83 cents, I think, in 2023 to every dollar. Women of color have it even worse. But men have their own issues. So while women's may be financial and making their money last, if, for men, if he is unmarried, he's likely to live alone. For women who are unmarried, they're most likely to live with their children across all ages. Men who live alone are more likely to be unsatisfied with life than women. Men are, they've done all kinds of studies, they're often unhappy with the number of friends they have. Men have higher rates of suicide, higher rates of alcohol use disorder, higher rates of drug overdose. So while it's hard for women because of the financial issue and the longevity, men, and it's probably, and we'll get to this a little more, because of the social connections, most men don't do as good a job with social connections. They tend to be more miserable. But now, there are upsides of solo age. So now that I've really depressed you, right? I've got more depressing stuff coming. But there are many upsides. If you don't have good relationships with family, you can have chosen family, right? You can choose a new family, people that you really like that become like sisters and brothers to you. You can have an untethered life. You can do what you want. You can please yourself. So many solos are very happy to be solo and choose to be solo. And we shouldn't assume that just because somebody is solo, that they don't want to be. All right, so now we're gonna dive a little bit deeper, and this leads into the health issues. And I'm looking at you guys, I have a lot of material on this, but I also wanna get to stuff that's gonna be more interesting to you. Just, I wanna say that living alone, being socially isolated and lonely are not the same thing. And many of the studies in the past really glommed everything up together. And so being socially isolated means you don't have meaningful connections with other people. Being lonely is a subjective feeling that something is wrong. Being lonely feels bad. Being socially isolated can feel bad, but it's just, literally you don't have those connections. If you don't think that loneliness matters, there was just a study that came out last week that still I'm scratching my head over, but it was an unbelievable study. It was in the UK, 500,000 people. So it's a big, powerful study, and they took baselines and followed people for 15 years. In that study in the UK of 500,000 people over 15 years, loneliness at baseline predicted Parkinson's at years 5 to 15. Now, maybe it's true and unrelated, but it was powerful enough that it was a finding. And there's already a body of literature out there saying that loneliness can contribute to neurodegenerative conditions. So, and we could go on, and I'll spare you some of the detail here. But my point is that loneliness is not just feeling kind of crappy. It's actually a health risk for people. All right. So now I'm a doctor, and I got to do more on the medical risks, right? All right. How much do you guys want to hear about the medical risks of solo aging? You know. Okay, so skip it?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Number one.
I went through something like that
7 is that higher?
recently.
What's the number one risk?
So dementia is one of the big risks. And it's probably multifactorial, because you already have a higher risk of high blood pressure, hypertension, hearing. You guys know about the hearing and dementia link, right? Okay, so if you don't know, let me make sure you know. Hearing is clearly linked to the risk of dementia, and it's specifically uncorrected hearing loss. And if you don't correct hearing loss when you can, you will lose the ability to ever correct it. So I wear hearing aids. I've been wearing them almost 10 years. Because in my 50s, I developed age-related hearing loss. But I knew that if I didn't correct it, it would become non-correctable. And that's what happens. If you don't correct hearing loss, you literally lose the neural pathways. And that is clearly associated with dementia. And there are all kinds of other medical risks associated with living alone, solo aging. Anybody want, before I click on any particular one you want me to talk about or carry on? Carry on. All right, so why do we think this happens? Like why, so we know all-cause mortality, that's a basic medical term that we look up. All-cause mortality is higher for solo agers. And this is my list. It's one that I made up as I thought about and I read about it. But there's all kinds of things. Everything from assumptions. The medical system assumes you have support people. So I'll give you an example from one of my clients. I had a client, a woman, just early 70s, lived alone. She had gone into the hospital with back pain, but while they were there, they figured out that her blood sugars were really high. And so they started her on insulin. Okay. She never gave herself insulin in the hospital, and the hospitalist walks in at 4 o'clock and says, okay, you can go home. And she's like, you don't have a ride, I'm going to bring you food, I've never given myself insulin. He's like, oh, it's easy, you can do it. She called me, I called the hospital case manager, I said, she's not leaving until she gives herself insulin, and we can arrange for her to go home safely. And she did, she went home the next day. But that doctor, who was completely dismissive of my client, assumed she had social support, which she did not have. Now, we were able to arrange for some support, but, assumptions can be, the medical profession can be very bad with that. There are just basic logistical challenges. Now, for you guys here at Woodland Ponds, much of the logistics, especially transportation, is much better, right? My mom has medical appointments. I am delighted that she can get a ride there, and I don't have to drive from Pleasant Valley out to here, do all of this. But for those of you that don't have a kid in the area, if you didn't have that medical transportation or transport to other trips, it would just get in the way of a good, healthy life. It makes a big difference. So you've made a fine choice by being here. Sometimes it's just something as simple as something's amiss. Another little example from my life. My husband had this little thing on the back of his neck. And I looked at it and I said, honey, that looks funky. And he ignored me. And then a few weeks later I said, honey, did you do anything? So, eventually I brought it up frequently enough that he finally went to the dermatologist, and sure enough, it was a skin cancer, and now he's having it taken off and he'll be fine. But I was there to see the back of his neck, and then I was there to bug him. If those two things, both the bugging him, nagging him, and the noticing it hadn't happened, that skin cancer would likely have progressed significantly. So, get a buddy, look at each other. You need somebody to help you know when something's amiss. And I'll just touch on one other on this slide, which is I'm a big believer in advocacy. I am an advocate. When you're in the hospital or when you go to the doctor's office, if you have a spouse who's able to do it or a friend, have somebody there with you. It makes a difference, especially when you're emotional, somebody's giving you bad news. You want to have somebody else there with you, who's taking notes, who's asking questions, who's making sense of the medical information. Yeah.
Microphone?
So what she said was record the doctor's appointment, and you can do it on your phone and then you can play it back. And I think that's an excellent idea. It still is even better to both record and have another human being, if you have one, who will help you think it through, because sometimes there are choices too, right? That you may or may not have thought about.
I'm gonna say something else about having someone, even if we have children in the neighborhood. Those children aren't young either.
So what she said is, even if you have children, they're not spring chickens,
Look at us.
you know? So they have their own issues,
And they have their own problems.
they have their own problems.
So who really
So who do you depend upon, right? And so, I mean, one solution is you hire a medical advocate like me, but there are, I'm not here to say that's the only solution. The other is that you develop friendships, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Some of the solution is deliberate interdependence with other people. I do something for you, you do something for me.
I have a question on Diane's thing about, can you record a doctor without his or her permission?
So,
yes.
so first of all, it's polite to answer. The question was, can you record without permission? In New York is a one-party consent state, which means, yep, you can. You don't have to legally get permission, but it's the right thing to do. And, you know, in my work as an advocate, I often am on the phone listening in. We always ask. They don't ever say no. I would say 10 years ago, doctors were much more like, don't record me, it's a medical legal risk. Now, I've not had anybody. Have you had anybody push back and say, don't record me? You have had somebody say, don't record me.
What was your experience?
Is that, the practice that I'm in won't allow it.
So, okay, why don't you repeat that?
I was told by one doctor that the practice that they were in would not allow it. I think that may have been New Vance or a predecessor.
Could be. We did, I can tell you because I was a chief medical officer, at Health Quest, we did not have a no recording policy. You could record. But people, some doctors and others are just very worried about medical risk. They think somehow that if they say something that's a little bit interpretable, that it might come back to haunt them. To me, you have to have a trusting relationship with your patients, or like, you shouldn't be in that relationship. But yeah, so recording can help. But these are all issues that I think contribute. And then there's the basics of medication management, right? You not only have to read that little teeny label, you gotta put it in the right spot, you gotta remember to take it at the right time, you have to tell one little white pill from the other little white pill, you gotta remember which one's for what. People get their meds wrong all the time. And so often when you have somebody there with you, between the two of you, you got it right. Other thoughts or comments on why all-cause mortality and medical illnesses are higher in solo agers? Okay, so how to thrive. So, I wrote my own quote down. Sometimes the problem is a person's world is getting smaller when it should be expanding, right? You know, solos fundamentally need to build teams and community. You all already know this because you are here. Many of you are already doing that here. And all interdependence is two or more people who depend on each other. You know, having a community is not going to bring back a missing spouse. It can combat loneliness and it can get you some help that you need. There's two components to interdependence: social connectedness and reciprocity. Social connectedness is simply you belong to a group. And how many of you have had the experience when you're in a group and something happens to one member and the whole group goes and they help them? You know, maybe they bring them food or whatever. You're part of a group. And maybe you're the giver, but maybe you're the receiver. Reciprocity is a more, I do this for you, you do this for me. I still have a car and drive, you like to cook nice meals on Friday night, which I like to eat. You know, whatever it may be, doesn't matter. But it's Reciprocity is another form of this. I mean, what kind of interdependence do you guys have going on here? Does this happen here?
Sure.
Want to give some examples? What kind of interdependence goes on here? I'll give you the mic if you want to speak.
My neighbor, Suzanne, goes away for a few days to see relatives. I watch her cats, or can pick up her mail, whatever she asks for. When I go away back to the city for a couple of days or something like that, she feeds my cats and does the same. It's easy, natural, it's neighborly.
It's neighborly and it's a perfect example of reciprocity. You have the
No, I was just gonna pass this.
Oh, by all means, somebody else have another example of interdependence that they have here at Woodland Ponds. Here, 2 down.
With the swimming, we have to have somebody in the deck. There's a whole bunch of us who share that. Some will stay on the deck and then they'll go on and swim a half hour later.
That's great, that's perfect. So taking turns so that people can swim is a perfect example of interdependence. Other examples here at Woodland Pond. Can you shout or are you gonna run that back? Thank you.
I can shout. Walking the dogs when someone has a back problem or can't walk. Or-
Yeah. So you walk their dog for them or they walk for you if
Yeah.
you have the problem. Yeah, that's right. Any other examples that people want to mention of interdependence? Oh, one in the back.
Oh, you have to walk all the way back. It's better be good.
I have a friend with macular degeneration who's local, and I don't know anything local. So in exchange for driving her around, I'm learning the area.
Perfect. So you drive her and she teaches you what's around here.
Where to drive.
Where to go. That's perfect. Maybe she'll get you a good apple picking spot. Other examples of either reciprocity or what about belonging to a group? There must be some groups here that people have formed, whether formally or informally. Well, there is the whole group, that's true. Are there other clubs or groups where you've found it to be beneficial? You said yes, what do you think?
Wait a minute.
If we have a lot of groups, and if you're in a group that meets regularly, we get to know each other, and then we have dinner together, and we do favors for each other. So I think that's true.
That's
And I'll say something else. On the other side of this, you have friends, and then they die. And I had a lot of friends before I moved here who died from cancer. And so you build your relationships and then suddenly you have to get friendly with new people. And that's good, but it's hard because it's much easier to keep old friends than it is to get new ones.
It is. It's absolutely much harder. That's one of the upsides, though, of being in a place like Woodland Pond, because other people have exactly that same experience. I've heard that from my mom. I don't want to say exactly how old mom is, but she has said, and I quote, "All my friends are dead." She doesn't mean all of you, but she means all those lifelong friends. So I think many people have had that experience, that people that they've known since high school or college days have now passed or moved away, to be near their children on the West Coast. And so it causes a whole lot of people to feel more lonely, but know that other people are feeling it too. Another comment here. And they need friends.
Gerda, I think that's a huge problem because I probably have 900 people in my contacts, and I bet you half of them are dead, and that's very depressing. And so you cast about looking for people I mean, we know who's alive here, but outside, people you knew in your youth, and you look them up, and half the time you find out they're dead. And that's, as somebody else said, most of the people I know are dead.
Yeah.
And that's psychologically very hard.
It is. There's no doubt about that, and I wish I could take that pain away, but I can only say it is really hard. And recognizing that other people are in the same boat, and from both an emotional and a practical point of view, other people in this room will share that same pain and same experience.
That's one of the things that I love about Woodland Pond. Everybody wants to make new connections. Everybody here is not with their children, doesn't have children, doesn't want to be with their children. Everybody here wants to make new friends, or most everybody.
Younger friends.
Pardon me?
Well, younger friends, that's true.
So they'll last longer.
Yeah, well, there's.
It's like when you go to when you look for a doctor, you always pick someone who's much, much younger.
So have you guys, so taking this whole concept and this whole discussion of the interdependence, of reciprocity for favors, of making new friends, have you all heard of this concept of a microboard?
No.
Okay, so I'll just tell you what it is and you can decide whether it's useful for you or not. It actually the concept came out of the Canadian disability system and has been adapted by some folks in the senior community. And what it is you literally, deliberately set about having seats on your own personal board. And so that you have somebody or several somebodies for all the key functions in your life. Anybody following kind of what I'm thinking or what that might mean? So what are some of the things where you might need help if you're a solo ager?
Going to a bank.
Going to a bank. Yeah. So that's a practical thing, but you also might need help with your money overall. So some people designate, whether it's a family member or a friend, if I can't manage my money, I want you to trust you to do it for me. And whether it becomes a reciprocity thing or not, but they literally say, okay, what are all my needs? And we'll go through a list in a second, but I want to see what you guys come up with. So financial is a big one. What
Medical.
Medical's another big one. Say more about what you're thinking.
Going with you to a doctor, interpreting, helping you to find the appropriate specialist, helping you to understand what your diagnosis is, putting your meds out.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I'll take that one step further. I hope everybody in this room has a healthcare proxy. So in case you don't know, a healthcare proxy is that person who will speak for you and should know what you want if and when you can't speak for yourself. And so a seat on the microboard could be somebody that helps you with your medical. It may or may not be a person who also is your healthcare proxy. But it's deliberately setting out categories of people and saying, okay, these are all my needs. Who do I need for each of these? And I'll show you a list in a second.
Also, power of attorney.
So, so legal is another category. And so whether legal is filled by hiring a lawyer, whether it's a person that you say, okay, you're gonna be my financial power of attorney when I can no longer manage my finances. But there's a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe you still have a business and it has to be dissolved and you need help with all the legal pieces of it. So legal is a big category. Anything else? So these were just categories I came up with, and you guys did great. Medical care and planning, legal, financial, Insurance, you may want someone who you say you're gonna be my point person if I can't handle dealing with all my claims, or to make sure that my insurance is going well. Living arrangements, probably not so much for this group, but social and emotional. Don't forget to have somebody on your micro board, if you do one, who is your support, who's your social person. And then there's logistics and assistance with logistics. And it's in this last category of assistance with logistics that most people, if they don't have somebody who will walk the dog or, feed the cat, end up hiring help. And so we have about 10 minutes left before I move on from microboard. Any other comments or thoughts? But it's basically just a way of deliberately, for those of you who like to deliberately plan, thinking, do I have the people that can help me if I need the help in these categories? Okay, comment, yeah. Sure.
I have a question about trust. Trusting other people to take responsibility for these personal, very personal and important things we've been speaking about.
Yeah.
And I hear about people who they get scammed. There's all kinds of stuff going on now. We're living in a very difficult time. And I have a feeling, I have children, I have 2 children. One lives on the West Coast, and he's very, very detail oriented, but he lives very far away.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in 5 years. It's a long, long time.
Yeah.
My daughter has a very busy life, and she's not good with finances.
Yeah.
At least she doesn't want to take that responsibility. So then the question is, who do we trust?
So it's a great question, and part of the answer is you have to sort through people. Part of the answer is you may want to hire somebody who's been vetted. I have a couple more slides, and I'll go through a few examples of the kinds of people can hire, and there's lots more, if they want to hire someone who is a professional in certain areas. My last slide is on what's called daily money managers. And a daily money manager will literally pay your bills and keep an eye on your finances and make sure the Nigerian prince hasn't emptied your bank account. So you can hire people that are vetted and certified and bonded to do all this. Oh, before I do my slides, yeah.
What's that word you used before the words money manager?
It's called a daily money manager, DMM. The society is called ADAM, American or Association of Daily Money Managers. Yeah, I know. Who knew this was a profession? It is. Okay, so hiring help. So say you guys are anticipating me. We'll touch on home care, geriatric care managers and patient advocates, and daily money managers. Okay, so these are, and I'm not, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. But basically, when it comes to hiring help at home, there's 3 levels. There's a companion does not wash you generally, does not do very intimate or personal care, but a companion will do homemaking. They might, sweep the floor. They'll sit with you to make sure you're okay. They'll accompany you. An aide, a home health aide, will help with more intimate, hands-on care. And then there's a nurse. And a lot of people just refer to everything as a nurse. Well, if you're going to hire a nurse, you're spending $150 an hour. Okay? If you're going to hire a companion or an aide, you're in the $30 to $40 an hour range. So much, much different in cost. And we'll just move on. I'm going to skip this slide except to say that there's all kinds of home care agencies and a gazillion different types and levels. And if we had more time, I would give you a talk, or I can tell you another time about home care and all the different choices. All right. Has anybody heard of either advocates or geriatric care managers? Okay. So a little bit. Geriatric care managers are the boots on the ground people that you can hire that will coordinate all the things that need to happen in your life. They can be really helpful. They'll do everything from make sure the cat food's being delivered to go with you to a doctor's appointment. An advocate, which is what I am, I'm a medical advocate. So I'm not the one you want to make sure your cat food's being delivered, but if you're in the hospital, if you're having, if you've got 10 different doctors and they don't talk to each other, you want a medical advocate to help you make sure you're getting the best care possible. As a medical advocate, I work across the country. Geriatric care managers are local. Question?
Private advocate, are you covered by insurance?
No. This is all private pay. All of these things that I'm showing you now, with the exception of a small amount of home care, are all private pay.
I just wanted to say, because I know we're running out of time, that a lot of this geriatric care managing we have here with Sarah and her team.
You may.
And the health center, right?
And then last, because the topic came up, daily money managers. So this is what they do. They pay bills. If you're still using cash, they get you cash. They collect statements. They connect. So most people have more of a team. You might have a wealth planner or a financial advisor. If you need money, they might call the wealth manager up and say, hey, where should we take the money from? And sometimes when people can't do it for themselves, daily money managers will serve as guardians or even financial powers of attorney. And they have a bunch of hoops they have to go through to be bonded, etc. So this is essentially my last slide. We did it. So basically, know your risks, right? Each one of you has a different kind of risk. Your medical risks, your financial risks, your legal risks. Know what your risks are and manage them. Connecting to people cannot be overstated. Having relationships with people, just like exercise, are probably the two things that are going to increase your longevity and your quality of life. People matter in all kinds of ways, even if they're irritating. People matter. And plan for your future needs, because how you are today is not how you're going to be a year from now. And that's just the way that it is. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Maissel.
That's part of why I finished up. All right, so we're done. Thanks for your time. Great day.